Hey everyone, welcome back. This is your host Brandy J with Voices of Courage. Today I have back with me, third time, but video, is the great Jack O'Holleran. And I'm so stoked to have him here. Always has much to say, much wisdom. Jack, I always tell people I feel like you're like my Italian, like you're like my uncle. Like you sit down with your, you know what I mean, with wisdom and you gain knowledge. So it's always a pleasure, a pleasure. So how are you doing?
Doing the best I can, whatever they'll let me get away with. So,
So what's going on? I know the last time you had the was it the family fair, the book
Family Legacy, we're getting
legacy.
ready to
Yeah.
shoot a mini series, and we have another picture called Red River that we're going to shoot in Nevada,
Awesome.
which is it's a great horror picture with a great Faust twist to it, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then we have another picture in Ireland called Ballad of a Simple Man that we've been playing with for a long time. I wrote it a lot of years ago, and we're getting ready to set that up to as soon as the pandemic stuff settles down. But you can shoot in Ireland now, so that's pretty cool. So
Cool.
we're just working away. And I got two books coming out, and we just put a deal together for a children's cartoon called Charlie Horse, which is
Awesome.
really quite good.
Well,
Oh,
that's exciting.
actually, I can't do this right now.
And I got to turn mine down too to make sure.
Which is very
That's
good.
awesome.
And it's about bullying and stuff. So it's quite good for what's going on in the world right now.
Yes, I love it. I love it. I've been trying to get people on the bullying to help me out with that whole. That's what happened with me at my job, and my son had to remove him from school to school because administrative just they don't do anything. So that's a huge
That's
thing
the
right
sad
now.
part. It's not like when I was a kid in school where the nuns took care of business.
Yeah.
Let me just hold on 1 second. Hold on
Yes,
one
no
second.
problem.
Max, Max,
Yo, Jack.
I'm on a Zoom call. I'm doing a show.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can I call you right back when I'm done?
Okay, yeah, of course, because I'm France. Say ciao to France. And
Hey,
we would
Franz,
like
how
to
are you?
thank.
Ciao, my friend.
So,
I'll call you
okay,
back as soon as I'm finished, Max.
okay. How much is gonna be long?
About an
As
hour.
far as you make about an hour.
All
Okay,
right.
okay, great.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, fine. Yep.
That's Hitler. That's
Busy
my
man.
friend in
Don't worry, I
Italy.
won't keep you long.
That's that's my friend in Italy. He'll keep calling me if I don't. Okay.
It's okay. So
So
yeah, okay. So a children,
we're
that's
doing
awesome.
and then we have a studio that we're building in Nevada, which is really terrific. That's the greatest deal. What is? I'm turning this off. Come on, man. Jeez. Oh, everybody wants.
Max, I won't keep them long, Max.
No, that's another guy. That's in reference to the studio. We're building a 4 million square foot studio in Nevada, and for the very first time in the history of the film industry, everything will be under one roof. And they're putting a smart city right next to it, which will house 30,000 people, all employees. So people will only have 15 minutes to go to work instead of 2 hours each way.
Wow.
They'll be 15 minutes away from work, which is very cost effective. And as
Yeah.
far as people being not being frazzled from traffic driving and everything else, so when they get to work, they're ready to work, and they don't make as
Yeah.
many mistakes and stuff. And it's but the studio itself is going to be phenomenal because we'll have every technology under the sun. That'll be the first time anybody's ever built the amount of stages that we're going to put into it. That'll be NC 25 soundproof. There's not. I don't think there's 4 stages in LA that are NC 25 soundproof, which saves you a fortune in production because the camera doesn't pick up all the noises from outside, so you're not stopping and starting all the time. Somebody's performing their Oscar performance, and the camera guy says, "Whoops, got to do it again." And that happens a
That's
lot in
awesome.
production. So
That's awesome. Like, you're the thinker, huh? Like ways to make it work, people stay safe, and because that's important. Making sure people less mistakes,
Well,
and then they
being
can get
able
to work.
to film and edit while you're filming and have editing right at your disposal and everything is a fantastic mannerism of what you're doing. So you're just having everything within walking distance is a lot better than having to run all the way across the city and come back again and all that. So
Yeah,
it's going to be great. It's going to be great for the industry, and the industry will move to Nevada.
that's genius. Wonder why nobody ever thought of that before or didn't care.
Well,
Because
the
it sounds the way you do it is you think of others
problem that
too.
you have, most of the majors today are owned by conglomerates,
Mm,
so they don't really care if they make money. It's tax write off for them. So it's not you don't have creative people running the studios anymore. So that
mm,
it really infringes on, and it shows that the product that's being produced. There's a lot of
yeah,
movies being produced that are really not that great. You know, and it's because of shortcuts and things that are being done, and so
yeah.
it's
That's
just
important.
it's sad. So it's going to be great what we're doing. It's going to be great for production, great for creative people. So we're looking forward to it. Plus, we're
Yeah,
building a
I'm
place
excited.
out of a material called industrial hemp, which is the future of building. It's a lot cheaper, faster, and more and much more stable than concrete and steel.
I like that. That's
So
awesome.
it's just revolutionary, the whole thing, which is quite good.
Yeah, that's epic. I'll definitely follow along. Keep me posted. I think that's amazing. Yeah. So how has everything been during? Because I know it's been a while prior to the pandemic. You can't say things anymore.
Pandemic. I got the shots because we have to travel around. So, but to me, it's. I mean, not saying there's not a virus. Okay, that's been, I think, man-made. But the fact of separating people and everything, I think, is ridiculous. People
It
six
really is.
feet apart and all that stuff. I mean, if you go back, I don't know if you're even old enough to remember the beginning of AIDS, when the AIDS virus
Uh,
first came out, and they said, "Oh my God, you can't be in the same room. If you breathe the same air, you'll catch AIDS," which turned out to be a total fallacy because the only way you
yeah.
could actually get AIDS is blood on blood. It has to be blood on
Yeah.
blood. And the way that they spread it, because it started right in San Francisco, and the way they spread it was they took it to Africa, where people use anal sex as birth control, and it's lesions. All they have a lot of lesions, so it spread like wildfire. And they took it to Asia, where they have children's sex with Indonesia and stuff like that. And again, your lesions on lesions, and it spread like wildfire. So they blamed
Mm,
Africa, they blamed this place, that place, they blamed everything, and that's all big pharma making a
yeah.
lot of money because of all the
Yep. The
concoctions
blame
they came
game.
with, and everybody said, "Well, oh my God, this and that," and so it's no one really looks at the truth of how things, but it didn't
Yeah.
separate the world like this thing's doing. Didn't make people
Exactly.
hide in their houses. There was no mask on anybody walking around, you know. And
Yeah.
they could have put that threat out there when they said, "Well, you can't be in the same room and breathe the same air as someone with AIDS, or you'll catch it," which was a total fallacy. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. It's
I
all
just
about what people will believe.
not saying that there isn't a virus, not saying there aren't people, but a lot of people that have gotten sick and died already had respiratory problems and
Hmm.
different conditions that they put they marked AIDS, I mean COVID on it because they were making money from it.
Yeah.
More people they
Yeah.
had in hospitals and stuff, and it's I
Yeah.
mean it's something you have to be aware of and be,
Yeah.
but it's
And
just
use your common sense, right?
that's it. Yeah, that common
Yeah.
sense is correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and not believing everything. Like I tell people, I'm like, you should research. Like I don't put myself in a position to tell people what to do because I'm no doctor, but I got common sense. Now I tell people you should look into stuff more. You should just not take what you hear. And if you're looking at
You
media
look
and
into
things
it, there's a lot
delude,
of doctors that are very prominent doctors that have their views on it, you know,
hmm, yeah,
and the views are as valid as the views that are pro that are pro the vaccine stuff, and there's views
Yeah.
that are very valid that are against it. So it's
Yeah.
so you sit there and you say, well, the problem is that our society is so controlled by media. The
Yeah.
media controls people so very much. People, because they don't go anywhere, they sit and they watch television. They're watching the news on TV all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
the news is made to win awards. They don't tell you anything. They don't
Nope.
really give you the particulars of what's really, really going on. They give you their manufactured version of what they're told to tell you, and that's sad.
Yeah.
When you have news media that is controlled by certain fashions, be it left wing, right wing, whatever people want to call it. But there's a definite socialistic movement going on trying to make socialism in America, and that's we're a democracy country. When you try to instill socialism in us, this is not a good idea. And that's what this whole separation of
Yeah.
people and businesses being shut down. There's a lot of small businesses that just have suffered and fallen apart because they haven't been able to earn a living, you know,
Yeah.
and they're trying to push people to be maintained by the state. That's socialism. But you're worried about getting checks and stipends from the state to exist for your livelihood. You're waiting
Yeah.
for checks from the government and stuff like that, stimulus checks and all that
Yeah.
stuff. That's socialism,
Yeah.
right down
I
to the
mean,
core.
being
So
dependent.
people better open
Yeah.
their eyeballs up and take a look at what's going on. It's
Yeah.
just a sad state of affairs. That's all.
Yeah.
People have to open up their
Well,
eyes and stuff. They just. I don't know. I think that this guy that's in the presidency is really a bad mistake.
yeah.
With Afghanistan and the rest of the stuff is really bad, not good at all. It's
No.
really
I
sad.
I can't believe it. I'm like, I can't believe I'm here for these times. I never would have guessed. And it's very, people are desensitized to it, and that's been over time built that way on purpose. And it's like, what are we doing? Like, we wait to the last minute. Like, people are still arguing over the dumbest things, race and all that stuff. I'm like, we're the human
That's
race.
the other
Everybody's,
thing.
everybody is that.
The racism thing has gotten so out of hand. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
You
We're
know,
here in 2021 and we're still doing that.
when you stop and think of the amount of people in a population, how many people are of different races, you know, and you look at what races are committing the most crimes and who commits what races are in your jails the most in your jails, and there's reasons for it, for poverty ridden areas where people live in ghetto type areas, and crime rates are a lot different and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
unless you've been born and raised in I'm 78 years old, and I was raised in Philadelphia. I seen a lot of changes, and I experienced them because I lived them. And when we were kids, there was what I guess you would call it racism, but nobody talked about racism. You lived on this side of the street, people lived on that side of the street, and we played ball together, and we did different things together, but you didn't there wasn't as much intermarriage, there wasn't a lot of interdating, it wasn't a lot of that stuff didn't happen, and you would never invite people into your home or stuff like that as much as they do today. And that was all foolish. That was just because there was such a minority of people, and you just and the gossip of this and that and stuff like that. And I remember when I quit boxing, and I took a young man who was from Philly as well. He was from Syracuse and then Philadelphia, and I made him super middleweight champ of the world. And I moved him into my house in Mulholland, up on Mulholland Drive in L.A. And people said, "You have that fellow living in your house?" I said, "Why not? He's an athlete that we'll do something with, and I want to make sure he's training properly." So every morning we took him out. We did all the things we're supposed to do and got him in the best shape he ever had. And we started a trainer called Freddie Roach, who worked in the corner with us, and he became one of the most prominent trainers in the business, trained Pacquiao and everybody else. And Frankie won the title, and he defended it well for several years. And you know. But and people say to me, "Wow, you would put a colored person living in your home?" I said, "Are you people crazy or what?" We're like in 200, I think it was 2009, so, or it was 19, no, in the 90s. What am I talking about? God lose track of time. It was in the 90s, and it's I said, he's a super kid. What's the problem? So you just things change in our society so radically, and the
Yeah.
way people, but the way they exploit it, the Floyd situation, and
Yeah.
things like that, and they overboard it. And it's you
Yeah.
shake
It's a
your
whole
head. You
other
say,
agenda.
yeah, just
Yeah.
what is it all about? It's like all the riots that were happening, and they were so organized, it was scary. It wasn't anything spontaneous. When you have people who are where loads of bricks were put in certain neighborhoods, and people were designated to go and take those bricks and throw them in the windows. And
Hmm.
then there was another group that went in and did the looting. And then there was a group that had the vans already in the back street waiting to take the looting away. Well, that costs a
Right.
lot of money to orchestrate that.
Hmm.
That didn't. That's
Yeah.
not a crowd just spontaneously doing something. That's
Yeah. They're
called
ramming
organ.
their cars into people too, and then
That's
there was no
organization.
repercussion. Yeah.
That's organization. You just somebody put a lot of money and effort into creating those types of things, and once you
Yeah.
instigate stuff like that, it's like everybody gets all hyped up when they have nothing to do better than to follow some idiot telling them, well, here we're going to give you $200 to show this
Right.
riot scene, and just scream and shout and do this and carry signs, and it's just for what, and they don't
Yeah.
even know why they're there. Half of the people don't even know why they're there,
Right.
and that's the sad part. And it
Yeah.
makes it look like the whole society is changing to that variation of attitude and
Yeah.
thinking. And it's just, it's sad. You hate to
Yeah.
see that happen. You really do.
Yeah. I've seen that
People
a
do.
lot where people were coming out saying that they were being paid to carry out certain social media adverse things to basically instigate and start
Oh, no, they definitely were.
yeah.
There's a man called George Soros that is one of the enemies of this country so bad. This guy has become a billionaire in his life and spends a lot of money creating these incidences, and creating the crowd problems and stuff. And his financial support was behind a lot of this, because he wanted to see this country go socialist. He wants to bring socialism into America, and that's it's not what we're about. And the people better wake up and wake up soon, and they better get out and vote properly, and do the things
Yeah.
you're supposed to do to maintain your own existence.
Yeah. Most
Maintain,
definitely.
to maintain your own existence. So it's
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think
it's
about the whole going back and forth between everybody's kind of like now saying, see, you should have voted for Trump, and like, is it more than that, or because I
well,
saw some
I
differences
will tell
between
you
Trump
something.
and
In
this
my
one.
own, in my, I've known Donald for a lot of years, and I thought he was very good for the country. His own mouth got him in trouble,
Yeah,
going on Twitter and all that stuff
that's what it
is
was.
ridiculous. He hurts himself. But was he good for the country? Yes, he was. Was he doing things for the country? Yes, he was. Was
Yeah,
he creating jobs? And was he putting the respect in foreign countries back in that this country was losing? Because you had a guy named Obama who just kissed everybody's butt, just bowed down
mhm,
to them, and took away the fear that people had of America and the power. And
yeah,
when historians look in the future. In fact, the guy from the Washington Post finally wrote a very, very true article about what's going to happen when historians look at the presidency of Obama, and they're going to look and say, where did he come from? He was a terrible senator. He never ever voted in the House. He didn't go to Columbia. His Social Security card was a fraud. He was not an American citizen. Should never have been president because he wasn't born in America. And that's
Donald tried to tell us too.
that,
He called him out. Nobody believed him.
well, people have called him out. He's been sued by like 43 different states. I have a copy of his original birth certificate. He was not, and he came into America as a foreign exchange student under an Indonesian parenthood. His mother was married to an Indonesian guy, and he was raised like that. And when he came into America, he came in as a foreign exchange student. And they said, and he was never published. So how he got all these accolades and everything is totally ridiculous. His whole existence was manufactured. That's what I'm trying to say. And I remember the first time when he surfaced, and being a street guy like I am, I called people and friends of mine in Chicago, and I said, "Who the hell is this guy?" And they say he's a slum landlord, Jack, and came from nowhere, and they've invented him. He's been invented. And I said, "Wow." And the people of America jumped all over this because he was pushed in the proper manner, and people came out, and because of the race and all the other stuff, having a black president for the first time, and all this jazz, and
They
they,
into that.
well, and the immigration that they allowed, they should have shut the borders of this country years ago. They brought immigration in to get votes. That's a fact. They brought a lot of people. You look at all the immigration people that come in here, how much they get from the government.
Yeah.
They get education, they get phones, they get food stamps, they get and you got people born here that are in
That can't
poverty.
get out.
They don't
Yeah,
get it. They can't get out of their own way.
that is true.
And then you look at people and say, well, we got all these people in the race factor say, well, they're Afghanis, they're from Africa. I said, well, wait a minute. Have you ever been to Africa? Have you ever been down there and seen how they actually live? And how many of those people were born? If you're born in America, you're an American. If your parents come from Italy or, oh God, hold on one second. Listen, can I call you back in 10, 15 minutes? All right. If you're born in America, you're an American. I don't care if your family were from Italy and they migrated here. If you're born here, you're here. You're an American. You're not. You may be of descent from somewhere, but if you ever been down into Africa, it's a tribal run country. The country is run by tribal people, and they have a definite manner of living that would scare the hell out of a lot of people. You think you got things in the streets here that are scary? Go down to Nigeria in a few places and sit around and see what you think you can get away with.
Yeah.
And how
That's when
they
people
handle.
are like, we can go back home. I'm like, I don't know if that's a good go back home. I said I'll take my chances over here with the where I was
Well,
born because I'm just not because of the skin. I'm not.
if they come, if you're in certain areas over there, you just disappear. They just shoot people, kill them. But they don't care. I mean, and I've been there. I've spent time there. I have dear friends that own. You see, that's where I got a lot of stuff from Obama. The Cellini family have controlled gambling in Nairobi for 50 years. And Mombasi and Malindi and Nairobi, they own casinos there for 50 years. They're dear friends of mine, so I used to go down there all the time. And Bobby had a casino up in Mombasi, and that's where all these people used to come in and tell stories about Obama as a child and everything. And how much money he was hiding in North Africa. And I mean, the truth is there when you sit down and see with your own eyes. You understand me?
Yeah.
And when you go to certain places where you can't move a muscle the wrong way, or they just shoot you. They don't care. That's their country. It's the way they run things. And I was in South Africa. I remember I boxed down in South Africa back in the 60s when the apartheid was about to happen. And the things that I saw happening in the streets were unbelievable about how they handled and people. If you were working as a house person in a white family, they couldn't keep you under that roof. They'd have to have a special house for you to live in on the back, or you lived in a compound. All the black people in Johannesburg lived in compounds, and and the apartheid wasn't about black people fighting white people. It was two tribes trying to kill each other, and the white people were just in the middle. I was when I was in the gym. There was a guy who was a trainer. And he worked in the gold mines, and he carried a gun on his hip all the time. And I said to him, "Why do you carry that pea shooter?" And he said, "Oh, let me tell you, you've never worked in these or been in these mines." He said, one tribe across from the other tribe will get into an argument with each other, and the guy will shake his hand. They'll take his hand and bite his finger off. So is there something they kill each other. It's just boom. It's just their natural. I said, "Wow, man," and we boxed in a place where there was no inner. You couldn't have black people came to a boxing match. They were given one section to sit in, and they were screened in. It was I never saw anything, and that was for soccer, for anything. Ennis Park was a big park down there, and I said, "Wow, that's unbelievable." And you wouldn't go into a restaurant, and black people weren't allowed in white people's restaurants, not even allowed in the hotels. And then there was this one guy who used to come in and sit, and nobody bothered him. And I said to this group of guys, "What's the deal? Who is that guy?" "Oh, well, he's a big wig from Nairobi, and nobody tells him what to do." And I say, "Well, there's the start of it, pal. This when the start of the apartheid was." And I said, "There's the start of it, And you just watch and you see it's unbelievable. The things that happen, and you watch the changes of how societies in certain places change, and the reality of it. And then you come home and you're an American, and everybody's fighting about this neighborhood and that neighborhood, and we're Africans. And I said, "Good. Well, why don't you go back over to Africa and sit down and see if you get away with that shit over there?" And they have no knowledge of their own history. That's the amazing. And here's the real kicker. All the black people that came into America were sold as slaves by black people in Africa.
That is true. That I came across the whole story
There's
of being
people who sold their own people. They sold their own people as slaves.
Yeah. In history, they never told us it was a lie. It was more like we were taken.
They never talk about that, boy.
Exactly. You know what happened one day to me? I started thinking about that. One day I was sitting there and I was like, I see how things are in the society that I've been raised in. And I started thinking, I was like, I wonder if that's really true. I said, because I see how black people can be now. Like, what is that about? It's got to go deeper, the whole, and then I was like, why wouldn't it be far-fetched that our own would sell our own? And then that question just arrived. And then I started to pay attention. I sought out, and then Lord behold, it was true. It just made me curious. I was like, it couldn't just be that we had nothing to do with it.
All the slavery deal was the tribal guys who sold their own people to white people for slaves. They filled boats up and sent them back out of the country. And people say, "Well, we were made slavery was in the South and all this." I said, "Whoa, bro, you're so far off key. You don't even know what you're talking about." Yeah, they had them on plantations and they were working there because they were brought in as slaves. They were brought to the country as slaves and sold as slaves. And it wasn't the white people that didn't go to Africa to grab people. They were given the people. They went to Africa and they were handed a group of people to put on a boat and bring back here. And I say, well, you guys better get your history together here. And if you don't know it, go down there and find out just exactly how it all started. And it wasn't only America. They sent people to other countries as a slave factor. The slavery was a big deal down there. They made a lot of money from it. So, people don't even have knowledge of their own history, and yet they'll stand up and argue and scream and shout and say how we were the bigoted people and made slavery and all this other stuff. I mean, when I was a kid in Philadelphia, when the problems of the racism thing really started badly, and there was a guy who came from North Carolina to Philadelphia. His name, you can look him up in your history book. His name was Cecil Moore. And I remember him standing at City Hall, raising his fist and saying to people, we need to pick up arms. We need to arm ourselves. In fact, now you're having street fights that aren't with sticks and knives, sticks and bottles and stuff. Now you're putting guns in people's hands. And that was a big change in Philadelphia. Cecil Moore brought a big change into the city about how certain riots and stuff came about. So you stop and you look at history and you look at how things really provoked and who provoked what and where it came from. And you shake your head in shame because you never really educated yourself on the true facts of what's really going on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really important. I tell people, once we realize that, in school that we didn't get the truth, we were lied to, that was that point where you now either you go and seek truth or you just settle for what you're told and then you run with it. And I know a lot of people just refuse to want to, even because they've been lied to, but I'm like, that's even more reason to want to know. You know what I mean? Since you've been so, or be quiet. You can't really speak on too much if you don't
I
know.
wrote this book, Family Legacy, which we're getting ready to really expand on. And I did it for a reason because I come from, my father was a very powerful mafia guy. He was one of the most powerful people that came in from Italy. And he was against, and he ran all the docks of America. Albert Anastasia, his brother was Tony Anastasio. Their family name was Anastasio. Albert changed it when he came out of jail to Anastasia, so he didn't mix the family in the street business. But he ran all the docks. He was the power of the docks of Philip. And you ever see a picture on the waterfront? That's Anthony Anastasia. That was my uncle. And he was college educated. He did all the business. My father gave the fear, made people listen to what he's talking about on the waterfront. And my father was against the drug business. He said, if like in The Godfather, you ever watch The Godfather? And they went
Yeah.
to Brando to get into the drug business. Marlon Brando said, if we touch it, our children will touch it. It'll be the downfall of the families. Well, that's exactly what happened. When the greed of heroin and different drugs, cocaine and all that, when it came part of society, then the greed of certain people start shooting people in New York. They started killing each other over the control of a substance that was killing society. And nobody ever told the truth about it. You understand? And Hollywood blew everything way out of proportion. They made Capone a much bigger guy than he ever really was. They just did a picture last year. I don't know if you saw a picture called The Irishman,
No, I haven't seen
when
that.
they showed a guy named Frank Fallon who supposedly killed Hoffa, and he killed a guy named Joey Gallo, and he never killed either one of them. Did he hit a couple people? Yeah, he was a driver for Hoffa, and he worked for a guy named Russell Buffalino from Western Pennsylvania. He was a dear friend. I knew him well. And the way they bring things out and they make it boom, because they're taking advantage of people not having the true knowledge of what's really
Yeah.
going on. So I wrote a book and said, you know what, we're going to tell the truth and just show how people were thrown under the bus and how things really evolved and what caused the problems that are there today. And a lot of people were unhappy about exposing certain things. And then now they're saying, you know what, let's do it. And there's other friends of mine said, let's tell it all. Let's just put it out there. Because people lived it. They know it. There's people who are 90 years old and stuff who lived through all the changes and they watched it happen, but they never seen it carried through the media properly. It's like one of the biggest disasters in this country was the assassination of John Kennedy. And no one's ever told the real truth about what really happened there and how it happened and why it happened. We're going to do that too. Because it's time for people to know that, Kennedy was shot 3 times that day. He got shot first in the throat. As you watch his Zapruder film, you see his hands go up to his throat, and he falls forward on top of Conley. Conley was the first guy shot. And then Jack fell on top of him, and then somebody shot him in his lower back, and no one talked about that for 10 years. And then the driver took the last shot when you see him fly backwards and the back of his head comes out. And they put a guy named Lee Harvey Oswald as a patsy. Lee Harvey Oswald never pulled the trigger on anything. There were three men in that window. There was a prison right across from it that looked right in the Bird building. There was three guys in the window, two dark-complected guys who were Cubans and one white guy. And they're talking about a mail-order rifle that's bolt action. And anybody knows anything about weapons or is a shooter or was in the military or whatever, when you have a shot that's 1,000 feet away and you have to take all the variables that are involved. You had a car that's going downhill in motion. You had signs, trees, and the wind factor in Dealey Plaza was so bad that the police recorders they couldn't hear each other because the wind was terrible. So you have to take all those things into consideration. And then if you're a shooter, you have to arrest your heart for 60 seconds because your finger has your pulse in your finger. So you want to control the trigger of a gun. Now, you're going to tell me that you shot 3 shots out of a mail-order rifle, bolt action, in 28 seconds? Never happened. Never happened with any accuracy. And if you're shooting from the location that they're talking about, Kennedy's back of his head was to that window. So how could the back of his head blow out if you're shooting him in the back of the head? You understand? And how did you hit him in the throat? Now, when the car was coming towards Dealey Plaza before it turned, if the shots were fired in that direction, you could get away with that story. But the fact that it turned down and went down Dealey Plaza and it never sped up and ran away. And there were 30 people in Dealey Plaza that day capable of assassination. And here's the President of the United States. And you have the book depository with all the windows open, people walking around, and the president in an open car below you. Never, ever, ever happened.
Okay.
You understand?
Yeah.
And you had the hobos that come off the train and were walked across the bridge that the car had to go under. And 30, there was like a bunch of hobos, and one of them was Woody Harrelson's father, who was a hitman for New Orleans, who was there. No one tells the truth about anything. And if you really sat down and said, well, if there was one guy who was responsible for Kennedy's death, who would it be? His own father. Because Jack Kennedy was not going to live out his term physically. He was dying. He had Addison's disease, which is a deterioration of your back, spinal cord. And they shot him up every day for pain. And he had syphilis and he had 2 other diseases. So the father would rather see him die the way he died than die with an illness and put a black mark on the family. And people say, wow, that's awful cold. I said, really? How about what he did to his daughter? His daughter suffered as a child from ADD. And it's before doctors had any medicines or anything to help it. And they were so afraid she was going to stand up and dance on tables and everything. So they lobotomized her and stuck her in a window. She sat looking out a window for like 40 years before she died. No one ever talks about that either. You understand? And when you look at the Kennedy deal and you say, okay, who was the number 1 cop in the country at the time? Everybody said, oh, it was Hoover. No, it wasn't. It was Bobby Kennedy. He was the attorney general. And 3 people went to see him before his brother went to Texas. One of them being a guy called Adlai Stevenson, who was a very prominent who ran for president. And they said to him, do not let your brother go to Texas. The animosity is terrible. The anger down there is really bad. Don't let your brother go down there. Bobby, who was his brother's second skin everywhere he went politically, didn't go before, wasn't there during, and never went afterwards because he knew exactly what was going to happen. No one ever talks about that. But every 10 years, more is divulged about what really happened down there. You know, and the hypocrisy is just, the whole Warren Commission was bogus. The way that it was put together was bogus. When they went to question, here's a guy, Lee Harvey Oswald, supposedly shoots the president of the United States. The FBI said they don't get involved because it wasn't a conspiracy, it was a one man deal, which was a lie. And now, when they're questioning Oswald, you would think that they would tape all the interviews and they would write stuff down about every interview they had with him. They did neither. And when he walked out into that garage and the policeman that was next to him stepped away from him when Jack Ruby was walking up to him to shoot him. And how did Ruby get into the garage with a gun if they're such security minded people? Here's a guy who shot the president of the United States, and you're not there protecting him, taking him to a jail, and he never got that far. They killed him right there in the garage. And Jack Ruby sat down when the Warren Commission sat down with him and said, Ruby said to them, "You can't talk to me here in Dallas. You got to move me out of here. This is not a safe place to talk to me." And he said, "I guess you guys want me to tell you about Chicago, where he came from." And they said, no, it was all. And Ruby died several months later in jail of cancer, which he never had. He was never sick a day in his life. But they were bringing needles from Tulane University and shooting guys up. Boom, cancer. Boom, dead. I can give there's a dozen people that died that way in jail. No one ever talks about that. There's a bunch of things that people don't talk about. Martin Luther King, the real story of Martin Luther King, no one ever tells the truth about. No one ever tells the truth about a bunch of people that are activists and crazos, and
Yeah.
everything is one sided. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
and Martin was a very bright guy, and he one thing that he did have was trying to do the integrate people and stuff, which should have been done. And it should have done it in an orderly way and a way of doing it and all that other stuff, but the way it was handled. But he himself was not the person that everybody thought he was when you get down and look under the covers.
Yeah, I
So
learned some things.
it's a sad state of affairs of how media controls your thinking every day.
Yeah, every day.
How you think, not
Yeah,
enough people were willing to stand up and say, "Hey, you know what? This is bullshit."
right.
When I wrote my book, I gave it to a dozen kids. And 3 weeks later, they all came back to me and they said, "Wow, how come they never taught us this in school?"
Hmm.
They looked up the real names of people that were in the book and everything. They said, "How come we never learned about this?" That's sad because they
Yeah,
don't teach you. They don't teach history and stuff the way they did when I was a kid in school. We
now they're trying
learned
to remove it altogether.
we learned about our history of our country. We learned about geography. We learned about different kinds, but
Yeah,
they don't. It's just amazing. They tell you what you want to be told.
yeah,
They feed it. It's like a feeding a machine. People
yeah,
people gobble it up and they just believe it to be true. And then you have kids. If you don't interface with people face to face, you don't really know them. You're sitting at your
right,
house texting people back and forth. You never see them. You don't know whether they're lying or whether how do you know who they are?
right.
Through texting,
Yeah,
and that's our society. How
yeah.
many kids are sitting? They just text people back and forth,
Mm-hmm.
and
To
they
have
go
that interaction.
and when they meet them and they get shook down or this happens or that happens because they don't really know those people. They think they do because
Yeah,
they're talking. Supposedly, they don't even talk on the phone. They're
no,
texting.
I'll text. Yeah, yeah. Very
You know,
true. Very true.
so it's a whole different. The society has changed so much.
Yeah,
It's just it's what I call mind-boggling. It's just
yeah. It's become very normalized. I one day I was walking from work with my son, and we were coming to our house. And then I was, walking and looking at my phone, but then I like thought about it and I just started paying more attention, looking around. I was like, everybody, no matter who I look at, even little kids, everybody's on a phone. No one's talking, no nothing. And I was like,
see.
I said, something's up. And from there on, I it just took off from there. And I was like, oh.
Isn't it amazing? Even people who can't afford to pay their rent have a phone.
Yeah. Yep.
Everybody's got a cell phone.
You can cross a homeless person and they'll be homeless, and but they can pull out
A cell
a
phone.
cell phone. Yeah.
There you go. You
Yep.
know, and nobody looks at things like that.
Mm-mm.
It's
Everybody's just on this phone, like program thinking, and that's what connected to me. I said, we're being programmed. Everybody's on the phone. Everybody. Bus driver has to drive, so certain things. But if not that, everybody. The little babies are on the phone.
look how many dating apps there are on cell phones.
Yeah.
People never see people face to face, but they're
Oh,
making dates with them,
I
putting their
never caught on
life.
to that. Yeah.
You know,
No
it's like
person. You don't get to know them no more.
no.
You barely know people that you see these days too. So you think, let
Bingo.
alone over a phone, like that's common sense. Like, yeah,
There you
I never
go.
that one never I never took to.
When I was a kid, everybody sat at a table every night and ate dinner at a certain time, and you better be there. So families looked at each other eyeball to eyeball. You could tell whether somebody's stoned out of their brains or there's a problem here, a problem there. But you had to be at dinner every night at a certain time. And when we were kids, we were in the street playing from when the sun came up until the sun went down. Dinner time, you were in the house, but you're out on the street playing. We used to draw lanes and drive our bikes and drive on skates around things and make and you did that all day. You were outside playing with other people all the time,
Yeah,
interfacing with people.
yeah.
You
Me
know,
growing up, I still remember that. Coming
and
from school and outside, all the kids were outside playing in trees, riding bikes,
when we were
skating.
had to sit at dinner. You had to be at dinner every night. There was no two ways about that, boy. You were in trouble.
We had
There
street
was no
lights.
excuse why you're not sitting at home having dinner with your family. And how many people do that today?
Nope. And if they do, if they even do, they have the phones. I have a friend that I just came from back from New York to meet with my our production, Real Wise Productions. And my friend at his house, he makes sure he's like no phones. Like if we at the table, he's like, everybody put your phones away. And so I respected that because we're at his house. So my son has his phone. I'm like, even when he wasn't there, I was like, no phones at the table, which I can respect. Because
Yeah, for
that's
sure.
for that. We need to sit
You
down
can't
together.
you can't stop for X amount of time to do things with your family.
Yeah.
You know, it's
My son, he was taking it to the bathroom, like fixing stuff to eat. And I'm just like, I'm like, put the phone down. It's probably why you burnt it. Like, don't looking opening the refrigerator. I was like, that's a problem. That's a problem. Uh,
it's an addiction.
yeah, parents, we got to get on it. We can't.
Well, it's just like people. Let me ask you a question. What do you think the first prohibition in our country was?
Was it alcohol, cigarettes, Coca-Cola? Prohibition.
You can look this up on your computer. The very first prohibition in America was 1914. They did what they called the Harrison Act.
Yeah, okay. You did
The
tell me about
Harrison Act gave Big Pharma permission to write scripts and control drugs. Prior to the Harrison Act, you could walk into a drugstore and buy marijuana across the counter, all legal. You used to buy opiates without a prescription.
that.
Cocaine was in Coca-Cola. No one ever talks about that. So when
Mm-mm.
14
No.
came and the Harrison Act came in, now Big Pharma was formed and they controlled all prescription drugs. So now you have women who were housewives in those days and nobody ever got divorced. There was no such thing as divorce. Whether your husband was a bad guy or drunk or whatever, people still lived together. And women were having, you know, up to 9 children in a family, 7 children, 8 children, boom, right? So they would go to the doctors because they were tired and run down from doing all this work. And the doctor would give them a prescription for speed to wake up in the morning and Valium to go to sleep at night. Well, those drugs they're putting in their body And those drugs are going into babies' bodies because when you're carrying a baby and you're putting those drugs in your body, the blood goes into a baby, and babies are born with. Okay. So in 1970, they did a documentary up at the hospital in New York, and they called it The Littlest Junkie because babies were being born and they were screaming and shouting, and no one could figure out why, what was wrong with them. Until one bright doctor said, these children are going through withdrawal. Their bellies are cramping. It's like an addict that goes through withdrawal. They get sick and their bellies cramp and everything else. They only showed that documentary once. And it's because people were being born with addictions.
Mm.
And in the 60s, it was all about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, man. It was like a wild period of time. Marijuana was just coming into the flourishment of, although it was around for years, it was being big time explosion.
Mm.
And a lot of people had or were being born with addictions already, and nobody ever put their finger on it. But
Mm.
Big Pharma didn't care because they were selling drugs, 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 drugs. And when they were selling them controlled like that, that made the business in the street come alive. For people that didn't want to get a prescription, they'd go in the alleyway and buy this and buy that. And that became a very lucrative business, drug wise. The changes in our society changed because prior to that, you didn't have as much addiction because people weren't, didn't walk into stores and buy this stuff over the counter as quickly as people thought they did. If that was today and you were allowed to go buy this, this, and this at drugstores, god damn, drugstores would be making a fortune. Just
Mm.
like marijuana. The
Yeah.
reason why they never legalized marijuana years ago is because they couldn't figure out how to tax it.
Mm-hmm.
Because you could throw seeds in your backyard and it would grow. They didn't have a control over it.
Yeah.
You understand? Now they legalized it. You can go anywhere. You can buy marijuana anywhere. There's stores everywhere. You don't need prescriptions, nothing. You walk in the store and buy it.
Yeah.
But how many people are in jail over marijuana bust? They're not letting them
Yeah.
out, are they?
Nope. Not at all.
So where's the hypocrisy there?
Yeah. And I heard in some states there's the stipulations like with this whole legalization of marijuana, they've made it, I think, like in New York, to where they could still catch you up by like if you're driving, or if you have it, like they found a way to still make it work so you can still get sent. Like the win-win
Like
for them. They're like
drive,
make money
like,
and send
like
you.
driving drunk. If you're
Yeah.
driving high, they're going to bust you.
Hmm. Yeah. Or
But they
having it
can't.
on you.
They can't. They can't really get you for possession because it's legal. But
Yeah.
if you're high when you're driving, then you shouldn't be driving that way. So they
Right.
catch you that way. So
Yeah.
it's a, if you do and if you don't.
Yeah. Yeah. It works for them.
There you go.
They never do anything for at the good of their heart, like for to benefit people. It's never. I've always seen it that way. I'm like, yeah, this is not to benefit. I just everything across the board. I just don't believe anything is ever to benefit us. So it's easy for me to spot it
It's
because I'm
tough.
like, yeah,
It's really tough for people to look at reality and with
mm,
truism of certain things.
yeah. It's like one times two is two. It's like if you make cures, then you're out of a job. Basically, it's sad, but it's true. So you want to be out of a job, so we can't cure you. And then food and drug, it's like that's how they come together. Got to give you this trashy food to keep you sick, and then put that in you, and that it's just like people don't understand. They make money off of our horrible health, off of our debt. That's why they don't
Look at
teach us
the
about finances in school.
look at the obesity in the country
Yeah.
because people fast foods. I remember when I spent a lot of time in Europe, and I remember that there was never. It wasn't until God, I think the late '60s, early '70s before they ever saw a McDonald's in London. You know, and I remember when they first put a McDonald's in Russia, and people were lined up around the block,
Mhm.
man,
Yeah, I saw a
to get
documentary on that.
yeah, and it was
Yeah.
to get a fast food hamburger, you know, and then fast food, everything was fast food, fast food. Prior to that, Europe used to the food was very healthy. You know, it was just
Yeah.
change,
I haven't had
change.
McDonald's in a year. I stepped off that train. I just like, yeah, I'm not doing that. I don't know what this is. Anyway, just
Well,
awful.
you don't know what it is right.
That's why I today like I kind of backed off of meat and everything, and now I just truly just eat for survival, which we should, I guess we do. But now it's not the same for me. It's kind of like, oh God, I can't do this. So and then you vegetables and stuff that's not always think because you don't know this whole organic and no seeds, and I'm like you spray it. I'm like this. You leave me and us no option. Like what? Can drink water without worrying about the water. Everything is just all screwed up.
Everybody's going to have to go back farming their own stuff again.
If they can find any seeds. That's the talk right now. Like where we find them. I'm like, yeah, we should have been collecting them when we did have seeds inside of the food we had. But nobody picked up on it. So now here we are.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah. All I can do is just
Anyway,
God, please.
been great
Yeah.
chatting with you, lady. It's
Yes,
we
it's
should do this.
always a pleasure.
Yeah.
Good places, good places.
Yeah. It's always a pleasure. It's always a learning, experience too. And you show me that I'm not crazy. Like I'm like, am I just crazy or am I catching on to this?
You're not crazy. Trust me.
Thank
Anybody
you.
anybody who's inquisitive today, people say, "Oh, they're off the rocker," because they're
Right.
asking questions. You're not supposed to ask questions. You're supposed to just look at the media, man. They tell you everything you need to know. Bullshit.
Yeah, they're off their rockets.
There you go, kids. That's it.
Yeah.
There you
Well, I
go.
appreciate you. And keep definitely I'll put your links up where they can find, still find is it on Amazon still Pharmacy Legacy?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
You
and keep
go
me
to
posted.
you go to movie family legacy the novel.com. There's a
Okay.
site that just tells you everything about everything, so it's kind of good. But
Okay.
yeah, we'll
Sounds
stay in
good. I'll
touch.
keep you posted.
We will
Yeah.
definitely stay in touch for sure.
Yes, most definitely. Everyone, this is the great Jack O'Holleran. It's always a pleasure, and I'll talk to you soon.
You have a good day, Brandy.
You too.
Take care.
Bye. You too.
Stay out of trouble, girl.
I'll try. Okay, everybody, thanks for tuning in. That's Jack O'Holleran. It's always a pleasure. He's such wisdom and just he lived his time, so he like you said, he talks about it. A lot of people don't. We're living in those days right now. No one's out here trying to be all malicious, and this is our lives, and for being like punished. You're like just before wanting to know the truth, wanting to know truth from people that they know and they want to know truth. But here we are. What where do we go from here? I'm just like floored sometimes. I'm so floored, You know, and I pray for the wrongdoers too, because I I just don't know. I don't wish bad upon anyone. So I think people bring bad upon themselves, and that's inevitable when you do wrong by people. That is something people put out into the universe. Always, it's guaranteed to come back and get you. So is it worth it? I don't think so. It's actually stupidity at its finest. But here we are. Here we are. And it shows you it's a lot deeper than just, you know what I mean? Come on. Get right in your heart. We're finding it just people are becoming enlightened more and more and more, and people are becoming more like into what their beliefs and like I just believe this, I believe that. You go, okay, that's fine and dandy. That's fine and dandy. But don't just sit within that because growth doesn't happen if you're just stuck in yours and you're not even willing because that is what keeps people stagnant. You have to question, why do I believe what I believe and why won't I even entertain truth or fact? What are you scared of? That's how I see it, and that's just what it is. But believing something and sticking in your belief, and you believe it, does not require you to have to run with it and never actually learn and grow more because there's the possibility of something not being true. Why wouldn't you want to know? Some people want to know the truth about the lamest stuff. You want to know if your girl's cheating on you. You want to, of course. Okay, then why don't you want to learn the truth about why you here or anything like that? All I'm saying, you ain't got to answer me because at the end of the day, you don't affect me, I don't affect you, so we say. But all I'm saying is Don't shorten yourself. You have to question yourself. You ain't got to question everybody else. You ain't got to drop no comments and tell everybody else what they tripping off of. I'm talking about you. Ask you those same questions that you be employing other people or saying why people need to think that, do this, do that, do that. Stop reflecting yourself, your perspective, your perception, and your experience on everybody else. Just drop it like it is. At the end of the day, it's that's your shit. Just like my shit is my shit. That's why I just like I enlighten. Like, hey, I'm not going around telling anybody what to think, believe. For what? I am no one to be in that position because I, as we all are, this spectrum on the bigger, broader. Come on, no matter how big you think you are in something, then go ahead and show it. Because if you are, then why aren't you out here trying to know it? That's some bullshit right there. You're stuck in your own little world, and no matter how big you think you are, just because you say it, don't make it true. Don't make it true. This is the biggest bigger, you know. So that's why I don't really let people sit. You know what I mean? I know me, and I know that people just got to deal with people. Stay in your lane, but paying attention, knowing, learning, you should always want that. And if as soon as the better, you can stop worrying about everybody else doing or trying to tell them something. You know, of course we should help one another. Of course we should try to enlighten one another. But see, people don't believe one another, and with very good reason. I mean, look how they do it. But we hit that one thing, that media, right? You're stuck in that. Stop out of it. They're human beings just like everybody else. Stop letting people play games in your head for free. You are very capable of being awakened and open to things. Don't let nobody rob that from you. That shit is fear mongers. It's not cool. It's not okay. And there'll be a day when that shit is going to, that we have nothing to do with. So I don't know. Just love, respect yourself, respect one another. I don't believe for one chance that someone that can't respect other people respect themselves, because true respect knows how to respect, and because you know how valuable that is. You know, once again, my opinion, right? Because there's going to be somebody else. No, that's not how. I don't give a fuck. You ain't talking to me. You're talking to yourself. Peace out. This is Brandy J. Voices of Courage. Much love and respect. I'm like, looking for my much love and respect, y'all, and have a good day. And just you know,